Hello. In today's session, we will engage in a detailed examination of transaction types, particularly emphasizing capture and authorization. We will begin by providing an overview of single-phase transactions, commonly known as sale. In a single-phase transaction, the merchant performs authorization, verification, and capture simultaneously. The customer visits the website and intends to buy a product or service that the merchant provides. So, they enter their card details, make the payment, and the product is delivered. Yet, for the merchant, the process is somewhat different. The customer browses the website, the merchant gets a payment request, processes the transaction, and delivers the product. This may sound easy, but single-phase transactions can lead to issues for merchants. For example, let's assume a transaction is carried out, and a few seconds later, the merchant receives a warning that the transaction was fraudulent. Since the charge has already been processed through a single-phase transaction, also known as a sale, the merchant must issue a refund, which can cost a lot. Given that this is a fraudulent case, the scammer who made the order will probably apply for a chargeback shortly. In this case, the single-phase transaction gives the merchant no opportunity to verify, making them vulnerable to chargebacks and incurring costs for refunds. Now that you are aware of some risks associated with one-step transactions, let's discuss the two-step approach, also known as authorization under version, which gives merchants extra security. In a two-step transaction, authorization occurs first, followed by verification and later the capture of funds. Here you can see how the process works. The customer is back on the website and the merchant receives a payment request. Authorization takes place. The amount is blocked in the customer's bank account, but no money is transferred. The merchant then verifies the customer and checks the likelihood of fraud, which may take up to 7 days. The funds are withdrawn and the product is shipped. This transaction process allows the merchant sufficient time to review the customer's payment request and subsequently assess the fraud score. The merchant then reports the transaction to the customer while the funds are secured. Until the capture is completed, no chargeback is possible, allowing the merchant to choose a free refund if they decide not to proceed with the transaction. Typically, this process occurs automatically and may take as long as 3 minutes. With the help of Shift4's API, the verification process, which determines whether a transaction should proceed based on a fraud score, can be handled automatically. This is the process. Once a card is authorized, the merchant gets a fraud score in just a few seconds. The system uses this fraud score to determine if the transaction should proceed to the final capture stage for the merchant. This is an overview of how the system arrives at this decision. With a fraud score of 70, the transaction is classified as fraudulent and the system automatically issues a refund without completing the customer's payment. At a fraud value of 50, the merchant decides manually. At a fraud value of 0, funds are automatically recorded for the transaction. What are the benefits of this two-step transaction process? To better illustrate the advantages of two-step transactions over single-step sales, let's look at this example. Suppose a merchant provides a free trial for 7 days. He authorizes the payment, and the customer experiences the service for 7 days. After the free trial period ends, the customer decides to continue using the product. At this time, the amount is withdrawn and the transaction is finished. If the customer decides against further use or the merchant opts not to complete the transaction, the merchant can refund the amount. Had the merchant employed a one-step transaction method, he would bill the customer as discussed in the previous example. He would approve the transaction and withdraw the amount immediately after the customer signs up for the free trial. In cases where the charge is deemed fraudulent or the customer requests a chargeback after the trial phase, opting not to buy the product, the merchant must bear the costs and time involved in combating the chargeback. How to save hundreds? Let's take a look at the example we provided. If the merchant has 1,000 transactions at 20 euros each, they generate a revenue of 20,000 euros. If the transaction fee is 2 cents per transaction, the total cost for transactions worth 20,000 euros amount to 400 euros. If the merchant typically has a chargeback rate of 1%, 1,000 transactions will result in 10 chargebacks. Let's assume that each chargeback costs 25 euros. This means 10 chargebacks at 20 euros each, plus the chargeback costs would amount to 450 euros. Thus, the total costs for the merchant for 1,000 transactions amount to a hefty 1,000 euros. Moreover, the time, energy, and resources spent contesting this chargeback are not even considered. So how can you save money with two-step transactions? As you can see, one-step sales can lead to significant financial losses for merchants. With Shift4 authorization and capture, businesses can effectively cut down on costs. This tool reduces chargebacks for merchants by about 60%. So, with 1,000 transactions, there would be only 4 chargebacks instead of 10. Just by doing this, the merchant would save 270 euros. If the merchant takes one step further and implements the non-invasive 3D Secure from Shift4, the number of chargebacks is even reduced to just one chargeback. This means that the cost for the merchant in the example would only be 45 euros for 1,000 transactions instead of 450 euros, a savings of 405 euros. To summarize, the authorization and capture services from Shift4 enhance business processes, assist merchants in saving money, and guarantee the security of the business. You can find more information about this and other features on our website. Thanks for watching!